says it's preparing to live stream.
Prepare to launch.
It says it's live now, and we will find out if that's true. It's redirecting to YouTube. Okay. Hi, YouTube.
Hi, YouTube.
We're getting there. Give us just a moment to set up things. And once I can see that you are here and I can see your chat. Okay. Okay. Yep, I can see chat. That means we are live.
Oh.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us. I am live with channel and alchemist, Susan Dyer. You can find her at susandyer.com. You can also find her on Facebook. I'll let her take over to tell you about YouTube.
Hey guys, welcome. And I have a YouTube channel. It's called Susan Dyer 111. Got a lot of videos up there already. And I also have a Facebook group called Divining Women. And you can find me there. And I actually go live every Thursday night to do Q&As. It's like a zero bullying zone, total kindness, like total honesty, anything goes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up your chat so I can see your questions. Patrons and YouTube alike, you're both welcome to ask questions. Patrons, if you could ask them in the ask a question section, just so that I can see that it's you. And YouTube, you can ask them directly in chat. Both of us are watching today. So Susan Dyer, oh my goodness. It's been a long time that we've been working together, and we're still working together just because we love it so much, not because she particularly needs it. She was a natural from the get-go and absolutely one of my favorite students of all times. I love so much Gnostic alchemy in this one, so much divine feminine connection, and I love what she brings. And I remember the first time I saw her, it was like talking to a combination of Pallas Athena, and Mary Magdalene. And I was kind of just sitting there observing and watching and going, okay, I'm not sure why this one doesn't know that she's connected to so many Christ conscious beings. So
yeah, that's been an adventure. And I feel like I have such a strong passion for all of this. But I did not know where to go, and I did not know who to ask for help. I had a near-death experience, and everything changed after that. And I found myself Googling endlessly for a teacher who I resonated with. And one of the primary reasons I ended up with you was what felt like a very deep and heartfelt commitment to zero fear. And that to me was everything. That was one of the two truths that I experienced while merged with God during that experience. The one of them was that fear was not real. And I had really formed my life around fear until I was 41. And so I needed answers, I needed help, and I could not deal with the fears just really threaded through, especially when you end up talking about maybe beings from other dimensions in particular. When I found you, Pamela, my heart just shot right to you. And I just started watching everything I could immediately.
Yeah. Wow. What I remember in the beginning of your journey that was so interesting is that there were all these connections that were happening around you, and you had this choice to embrace it or be afraid of it. And then simultaneously, what I deeply respect about you then and now is that here you are, this powerful goddess in a body who doesn't really know what to do about all this. And you could bring it in the direction of anxiety and overwhelm and empathic overload. Sympathing is what I call this, channels and healers alike. There's a lot of things that you guys do when you awaken to channeling that could be positive if you ground it out, or it can be incredibly detrimental. And you were, when I first met you, you were right in the middle of that. And you're like, I'm just trying to keep my shit together.
Most definitely. It's
Yeah.
true. But that's the thing. It's like landing in your lap, truly, it was the perfect fit. You do not, like, I've heard you speak on nearly any topic that could ever come to metaphysical mind. And I learn without that lens of fear. And that's really what I needed desperately.
Yeah.
Know it, and we have, such a long connection, like God knows through how many lifetimes and dimensions. But to me, that's so important. And it reminded me, actually, for anyone considering a reading or working with Pamela, there is this saying. So I had to stop drinking 18 plus years ago. And there's a saying in that whole structure of getting better and getting sober, where, you choose someone to help you who has what you want. And that's what came to mind when I finally landed with Pamela. That was accurate on every level.
There were so many things between trying to transcend the anxiety. For those of you who have struggled with anxiety, it's normal, channels, healers. You're coming through an archetype where you're being put into a world and told to go at breakneck speed. And that's normal. And that if you can't, that you have a disability or you have a mental illness, you have a disease, something's wrong, something's broken. We need to heal you. We need to fix you, et cetera, all these things that you're told, both from the psychological, psychiatric communities to New Age communities and spiritual communities all around the world will tell you that something is not right about your experience. And what really is important to understand, and Susan can tell you more than anything, is a channel who is incredibly, when she first came to me, she was so overwhelmed in the senses. You are not a robot. And this environment is structured to teach you how to turn off the emotions, turn off the senses, and get behind a machine or a computer, whatever it is, get behind a machine, a computer, a car, a this or that, and turn into a neutral being with no emotions and drive your way through as if you are a non-sentient robotic being. You are a human being with emotions that are meant to guide you into spirituality. So of course it can be so overwhelming. Slow down. It's one of the things that I really appreciate about you, Susan, is that everything I asked you to do as a teacher, you did it. Every single thing. We have so much trust together that before I could even speak it, you'd say, oh yeah, I know I need to meditate more. It would be coming off my lips, and she as a channel would say it, or she would think it and I would say it. And we just had that instantaneous connection between us as teacher and student that we became eventually like two teachers talking together. And I'm like, hey, by the way, why are you still here? Oh, because I'm still not meditating.
You said that to me last time. I was like, no.
I tried to let you go.
I know.
Kick you out of the nest.
Yeah.
Why are you still here? Well, because I'm not meditating, because I still have anxiety, which means that even though all of my abilities are active and running and I'm helping people and I have an active, flourishing business, and I'm helping the world, I'm using these gifts, they're so full on that I need to actually work on pratyahara. And that means how to manage the senses, frequency management, what food am I taking in energetically and physically, and what food do I need to retract from, like negative emotions and things of that nature, not specifically with you, but the world.
Yeah.
So what I observed about you is that you were real quick to say, okay, all my abilities are open. And what I want to work on now is myself, my connection to myself, going into my full aware state, being an aware, conscious being in this form. Even though I am not this form, I want to be aware of this form and all of its creative intelligence. So you're bringing God into form creatively and in a discerning, intelligent way, which makes me feel so honored to bring you into this world, because you're right on top of realization.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad you brought up, of course you did, the topic of emotion. because that has been a huge transformation for me. I actually am someone who purposefully tamped down my emotions
Mm.
entire life. They felt too overwhelming to me and therefore too scary because I already was living in wild fear, anxiety, and depression. So I didn't realize slowly over time, I basically sectioned off my emotions. And it was not until after my near-death experience and after hearing Abraham Hicks speak of emotions as one's actual compass that my mind was blown. And I had never even considered allowing that data to pass through. And when I heard that and started integrating and then heard it obviously echoed through everything you say, that was my first big exploration that broke the ceiling. So, Alana asked, when did you know you were a channel? And honestly, though this might sound surprising, but it was not until after I made the commitment to allow my emotions to move through as they will. And that only happened after my near-death experience. Like within the last 2 years, did I make a commitment like, look, there's something to it. It's resonating like dead truth. And what you have been doing clearly has not worked. I have every label you can think about. I've over the years, like depression, manic depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorder. I've experienced alcoholism. I've experienced eating disorders. Like the way I was running this ship was not working. And I also heard Wayne Dyer once. I don't know if he said it or if you said it, Pamela, but I heard him described as an emotional alchemist. And my heart blew up into the sun when I heard that. I thought that's what I want to do. And there was a spiritual class you once taught, and I actually was the one who asked for it. And I was so.
I remember this class, and you were on screen in the class. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like every time we work together, but it's like you asked every one of us. I don't know if you remember, but you asked every one of us to come up with a slogan, for lack of a better word, about what you do. And all of this, this launch pad of mine roots back to you. And I came up with, and I shared it with you in an actual mentorship later, but that I am a Phoenix launcher.
Oh, I was asking for your I am statement. I was
Yes.
asking you to ask yourself, who are you? And then you get to fill in the blank for your mission statement. You were asking how to find mission. Whatever comes behind I am becomes a mission. And whether or not you're conscious of it is one thing. And what I've observed about you is that you are one of the first people to answer that question. And you were so clear in it. I am this.
Yeah. And that's what I hope to help others with, is to come out of whatever dark space it is or confusion and just get launched to clarity. But the thing I also respect about you and that I do in my work too is you value teaching every one of us to access and be aware of this ourselves. And to me, that's like so pivotal because I believe any one of us can blossom our awareness, that any one of us can evolve what we would call extrasensory, awareness. Like
absolutely,
all of us can get, in greater touch with our divine selves. And I love that about you too. I mean, that is pivotal. That also keeps me with you because I believe so deeply in that empowering truth.
Yeah. Well, I know what it was like for me to work with you. It was a combination of excitement because I knew that I was going to laugh. You're so full of the energy of celebration and joy, and you don't have any more shame. It's one of the things that we work through in the emotional integration together, which is a part of mentorship. We have to make sure that you're emotionally integrated enough to handle the gifts, the CDs that are coming through. because otherwise cities and spiritual gifts are just magic tricks. And what I am known to do on this planet is to help people understand cities in a way that starts from purpose and a grounded mission, where you truly know how to connect to self and then serve from the heart of God in you, as you. So I'm with you, just holding your hand, helping you develop those things. However, you had such a grounded way of understanding, because it's like your gifts blew open. Your gifts, much like Alana, when I was interviewing Alana, she and I had that same awareness. Your gifts, both of you, your gifts just kind of blew open throughout a very short amount of time in your first year of mentorship with me. Like in the first 3 months, you were one of those that just went poof, like a firework display that started at the end of the display. So you understood that all those gifts were already there. So what we had to do, because you are sort of a top-down learner,
Yes.
everything exploded in your face and caused so much overwhelm that we had to ground you out with sadhana. We had to ground you back into your breath, your connection to prana. And we had to go through all the 8 branches of yoga one by one. And she was very committed to her breath, to really understanding that it's not a matter of doing. It's not a matter of, even though we had plenty of exercises to ground and plenty of ways to remember the breath, it's a matter of just the sadhana, just the practice of breathing, and just the practice, not of mindfulness, but mindlessness. Just the practice of understanding pratyahara, and that you know how to withdraw from the senses when they're overwhelming. You understand more what's happening for you and why. So it's just, I really feel that you're coming across like you blew up top down, and then we had to bring you bottom up. We had to build a foundation so that your gifts could really stabilize and come into a way that you could offer them to the world. And then you began. And when you began, because you're so gifted and because people view your presence as powerfully authentic and loving, you can tell it like it is and still be from a place of complete love, and still be here as an activator and a catalyst on this planet. So you catalyze people. You don't always say the things that they want to hear. You're very authentic. You're very truthful. You're very transparent. And you're not afraid to be vulnerable, which means that you can sit with a teacher, and you sat with me and said, okay, here I am, innocently and vulnerably. And you were like, mold me, shape me, help me become the who I am. And for me, I don't have to help you become. I just like clear everything that's out of the way. I just help you to get there, to clear everything that's out of the way. It's not a matter of building you into something. You're not clay and I'm not your potter, but you showed up that way. You showed up in a way where you were like innocent about it, trusting about it, not saying, let me tell you what you're going to do to bring all my abilities. You came to me and said, what do I actually need to do? And I'm like, well, let's talk about how you realize who you are. And the steps.
I didn't know what I didn't know. All I knew is that I was going to serve in this world, that this was everything. But I didn't know what that was going to look like or what that was going to be. And I'm personally like allergic to shoe boxes. So I dabbled in like every class. Like I like get all my things up to the certification just because I want to learn and do, but I don't want to be like a Reiki conveyor belt. I'm like an endless, endless toolbox of everything I love to learn about. And you offered for the first time, like I was born clairvoyant and all my life did not know what to do with that, could not make any practical use of it. It was nothing more than like I lived in a screensaver, felt deep shame about it, couldn't talk about it. No one believed me. I grew up knowing I was broken. And we talked about this the first time I ever talked to you. I actually thought who we know now as Archangel Michael was the devil because of my religious training. So I grew up not only thinking I was weird and broken, but that literally the devil was following me damn near every day. Archangel Michael. So it's like growing up like that and having such deep shame and such deep fear that you were you Phoenix launched me. I needed someone where I could say anything and that you received it in grace, and that the talk through and the homework and the exchange lacked any echo of fear. I mean, that changed my life. I mean, that was the first, you are the first relationship I've ever had like that. And it just absolutely was just what I needed. And you would never tell me, I don't like that. I will buck against that. Even as folded up and transparent as I made myself, like all those years, I still like, with this means so much to me. And I feel the same. Like, I would never deign to tell someone like what something is or how they should do it. Like, to me, this is an expansive journey, an exploration. And I so value the way you receive me and kind of neutrally but lovingly work through whatever is going on.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's your channeling style like? I view you as you're such a clear conduit, but how do you view your channeling style and your technique when you're working with people? What can they expect with working with you?
So, I mean, I don't even know how, like, I wouldn't even know what words to put with it. I just know that when I channel, or if I work with someone, like if a woman comes to me, for example, and we're going to have a session. So I always meditate for a long while in advance. And then I ask to connect to your oversoul. And then the fun begins. I don't know like how else to describe it. It's hard to put into words, but I mean, anything could happen. It could be like a knowing through a bodily sensation, or, a stream of images, or I could see an image, out here, or, but always I would say that's the goal is to, at least my goal is to capture what is for your highest and best, where you're at in your spiritual development, no matter what that is. And like, I was just working with Eva yesterday, and, who knew we had like a massive, his name that I got was subdominant guide, is named Mangus, a massive, Asian warrior, just the nicest, funny, just like hanging out with me, like pulled up the seat, sitting right there. And then I've got, we share, and I think I was going to ask you this, like, even I, for example, share many fractals. So connecting with her oversoul was, and I've noticed that the women who I end up working with, that we have so much and such meaningful overlap. It's like there is clearly divinity in how we all come to each other. And it just goes from there. I mean, I talk to whatever or whoever is coming through, subdominant, oversoul, my guides. And just like you, I glean all my senses all, same time. And it's such tremendous fun. And in my own practice, I mean, thank you, Pamela. Like, you have enabled me to gain traction and meaning from these gifts. They were not serving me. They were not helping. I was living in like a crazy carnival of, tricks without being able to harness them to further my own development or anyone else's. And that is really why I came to you. I knew things had blown open, but I did not know how to, like, and I would pray and ask God all the time. I'm not religious, by the way, but I love the shit out of God. And
I'm going to quote that. Susan loves the shit out of God. I love you.
I would always pray that so hard, like, God, please show me. I know there's a way to bridge this. I know there's a way to garner meaning. So I know this is translatable to help other women. I know that, but I mean, I needed you in human skin. And I don't even know how you did it. It's not like we even specifically tackled that, but it is the natural evolution of what happened. Now I am aware like this, and all of it can be used to good purpose, which is like in my heart, I knew that was always meant to be that way. That makes sense.
Well, it's very interesting because I think I gave you probably the most amount of homework and mentorship that I've ever given to anyone. You were so busy. And then simultaneously, you're also writing a book and revisiting a book that you had written a long time ago as well. And then, and going through all of these things with your own development and then beginning to help people. And I remember telling you specifically, jump in. You've been a clairvoyant your entire life. What we need to work on is just breath and meditation and like really finding a way to honor your purpose throughout each and every moment of your day. And when you were just given the permission and the activation to just kind of jump in, because that's what I do. I activate people. I'm an activator on this planet. So sitting before me, you will feel certain things that you never felt before. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not. You will have access to certain parts of yourself that you probably felt that you didn't before, but you did, you just didn't know it. And sometimes when the teacher and student meet and they begin to reflect and see each other fully, sometimes it became so unique for us because we would have experiences wherein we were experiencing our lives as the other one. I remember a lot of times I would check in and astrally project into your experience and check in on how you're doing. And I would see like me 10 years ago, and sometimes you would check in on me and you would see where you're going. And you're like, oh, that gives me hope because I see myself in this. And we had these experiences on screen as well, where we got so close that we could not energetically find distinction or separation in our personalities, in our essence, in our techniques, in our goals, in our purposes. We began to see each other as one being, breathing the same thing. Sometimes we would say the same things. Well, a lot of times we did that. I'd say things and you'd just be nodding because I would know that you would be thinking it in your head. And that's not even me reading you to get it. It just comes out. And when you're working with a natural channel, it's really, really easy you'll find that with Susan, that she just causes so much safety that you can actually begin to connect and trust her in the same way that you would trust yourself. So this is one of the things that I love working with her. Some of other people that I know like that, Jenna Lemire, for one, if you want to find her on YouTube and on Facebook and anywhere you can. This is a person who has kind of a similar essence to you that I've worked with off and on. On each side of the fence, both as a student and as a teacher. So when I meet someone like that and there's a connection where we can't tell each other apart, there aren't distinctions anymore, that to me is oneness. That to me is saying we definitely chose well and working together. That's something I've always appreciated with you.
Yes. And I do want to put like a funny kind of side note in there. For you guys, like, and I know this happened because I read comments and I'm always like in our, in your community and like in our community. It's okay, but that's how I feel about it. And for all you guys who have dreams of Pamela teaching you, those are 100% real. Like, I literally, this happens frequently with me. I mean, I'd say like once a month.
Yeah, my higher self has a mind of her own. Sometimes I'm conscious of it, sometimes I'm not. So about like 80% of the time, I'd be conscious of it with you because we're just so connected. But with other students, they'll come to me and tell me stories of your oversoul visited me and we were eating blueberries. That's the most recent thing I saw. And what does that mean? And I'm like, actually, you do need to eat more blueberries, and so do I. And we are one. We both need more blueberries. So that was a very literal thing there,
No meaning is ever wasted. It's so true. It's like from the sweeping things to like, no, we're supposed to be eating more blueberries. It's
So I'm really excited because a lot of my students are coming back and sharing their experiences with you. and they're saying some powerful things, some really phenomenal things about your essence and how much they feel at home, as if some of them say, I feel like she's like, I've known her before, that I can just say anything to her. I'm sure people tell you this all the time though.
That's like the greatest compliment though.
Yeah.
It's what I craved my entire life, having any kind of community where that's the case, you know, where you are embraced and loved just as you are, you know. Yeah. So thank you for that. If I could, like, if people come away from me saying they felt safe and understood, I'm like, whoop, done. Great. Because honestly, so much, like, I know the way you say that you're an activator, but I gotta say, you know, I didn't even know that about you or what that term really meant until far more recently. But I knew it of you the entire time we worked together. For you to say, dive in, get out there. What are you doing? And for me to trust so deeply to where I'm like on YouTube and doing like live channeling, book, like even me a year ago would be like, no way. I had to spiritually come out of the closet with my father 2 years ago, and that was terrifying. Yeah. So your energy braining into mine over all of our conversations. I mean, I got to tell you, like, I've been so afraid my whole life. I've lived purposely so small and so invisibly, to be here and so free about it. And I got to tell you, like, yes, you are an activator. There's no way I could have believed this, even like working with you even just a year ago. There's no way.
Well, guys, we're open to questions about channeling. If you're new to channeling and you're curious what it's about, what it's like to be my student, if you're curious from Susan more about what she does in channeling sessions and in the alchemy, she does a lot of healing work as well. We're very similar. She's more of a catalyst than I, and an activator as well. I find that being around Susan, there's a lot of your own healing abilities, things that you aren't aware of yourself come out. They just naturally happen. And it's one of the things that I really, love watching my students work with her. They come back and they say, oh my gosh, I'm clairvoyant. I didn't know I was clairvoyant. These things are happening to me. So some of the things that happen after readings and mentorship with me, where your gifts are activated naturally, those things happen with her as well. So we're getting some YouTube questions. Patreon, I still don't see any questions from you in either chat or in the Q&A on Zoom. So you're welcome to put them there for either Susan or myself. We have a question from YouTube first, and it is, how do we increase our ability to channel? How would you answer that, Susan?
Well, for me, I had been meditating for 18 years, but looking back, nothing along those lines was ever going to happen until I made that commitment to honor whatever emotion was going on within me. For me, that stands as one of my most groundbreaking, ability enhancing intersects. When I was like, all right, I guess this is, I just knew I had to do it. So for me, it's like, if you really, in my experience, I mean, I didn't even know I was channeling until this happened, but in my experience, by keeping intentionally aware of your inner atmosphere, whatever collection or mixture of emotions is going on, and allowing them to be, and committing to not judging them, but accepting and respecting them, mm-hmm. That is what blew up my channeling. Mm-hmm. That emotional commitment, that is, for me, was everything. But I think that said, and I know Pamela agrees, that really must be accompanied by the discipline of daily meditation. Yeah. That, in my experience, is the thing I see most holding people back. Mm-hmm. There is not that ongoing daily foundation.
Mm-hmm. To me, it's the commitment to breathe. And it's not apparent to most of us because it's involuntary. But Could you do anything successfully in your life without being able to breathe? No, you couldn't. So what would happen when you bring it into your conscious awareness? So for me, meditation, my sadhana is not strictly devotional, even though it is very devotional. It is from the foundation of breath. And that was taught to me as a child, when I began to have vocal lessons, have teachers that taught me how to breathe before they taught me how to sing. So that carried through. As voice singers out there, you know what I'm talking about. Voice teachers, you know what I'm talking about. And it's so important just to bring your awareness back to your breath as often as possible, especially empathic channels. Someone was asking, do either of us feel the emotions of who we are channeling? And we'll get to that in a moment. But most of the time, as an empathic channel, you will. And what I've noticed about breath and a connection to this question is that most channels stop breathing often, way too often. They hold their breath. This is the worst thing you can do. It kind of, you're never disconnected from God, but it blocks the apparency, if you will, of God. God is a lot less apparent. Higher self is a lot less apparent if you're holding your breath. So what do you do when you panic and you get full of anxiety? You go, and you hold your breath. It's fight, flight, or freeze response. And we're taught to avoid fighting or flighting. Therefore, we do a lot of freezing and we kind of go, ooh, and we just hold our breath. So what if we became more aware and cognizant of when we do this? That would be an incredibly powerful thing to begin your sadhana, as just the awareness of breath. And that's why in my Kripa yoga practice, we talk about a technique that teaches you from the beginning how to be aware of your breath. So insofar as the next question, they want to know, do you, Susan, feel the emotions of who you channel?
I do on occasion, but it's not something that happens regularly. Mm-hmm. I will every once in a while, and I don't see a pattern to when or why that happens with me. But I would say for me, I guess it would be more so clear cognizant. Like the feeling of it for me is like an absolutely huge beam, just like that. I don't know how to describe it, but I'll get a lot of images that kind of illustrate the emotion, but no, I'm not someone like, I have a friend who can tell if I'm having a cold. That is less so how things come to me, only once in a while. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what that means, or if I can help any further with that question, just let me know.
Yeah. Someone who is apparently pretty well-versed in, some of the Eastern modalities of breath and pranayama is commenting, about, his experience in his country. And I completely agree, Spirit. He said breath is taught by many Indian masters. And he also said it's more than just your awareness. It's how you breathe, like pranayama and the techniques of pranayama. And I completely concur with that statement. The India is much more aware, than the United States and Canada in particular about breath. And this is why I teach from the 8 limbs of yoga and pratyahara, which is, pratyahara is where I started. Most people start with tapas. Most people start with point of focus, but for me it's pratyahara. I began to be overwhelmed. I am a top-down learner in this world. And basically I began to teach myself how to go bottom up. And then when that happened, many yogis from spirit and both living and spirit masters came, and all of those masters are from those areas of the world, both in Tibet and India, all my masters. So that's interesting that you bring that up, because pratyahara and pranayama are a big part of my teachings in Kripa Yoga. So if you want to learn more about that, you can find those practices through patreon.com/Pamela Aaralyn. You can look at my website if you want to do any of the Kripa Yoga practice 101. I can teach you it one-on-one as well from my website at PamelaAaralyn.com. But I agree with what you're saying. with that breath is overlooked in the United States. And all it takes is just breathing. For even Yogananda once told me that if my students would learn to just sit in any proper asana, any asana, efficiently and effectively, while properly breathing, in the proper position for 30 seconds, that they could add up to 30 years of their lives. Wow. Can you imagine that? How powerful that can be? It's just so incredible, what breath means to channeling.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I've always had asthma. So I'm like well versed in the clench up, if you will. And I just started paying attention to that working with you. And I am someone who can easily slip into level 10 anxiety. And I find that like, if I even pay attention to 3 breaths, it creates a visceral difference. It does. I mean, it does. I mean, I'm new to this, the breath thing with you too. I mean, I'm just learning, but I can already attest to how incredibly powerful it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have another question from a patron, and she's asking, Susan, what was one of the greatest challenges you overcame from taking Pamela's mentorship program?
It's very, it might be specific to me or not. Mm-hmm. It truly was Pamela's gentle yet insistent, kind of shoving me off that cliff.
Yeah.
I mean, going out there, getting out there, having a group, channeling live. I mean, doing YouTube videos where, I know like someone who I'm going out on a date with can Google me and see exactly what I'm up to. I mean, right. I tell you, like,
you cannot hide.
No. And that was like my biggest fear all growing up was, I mean, I was desperate to hide all that, to like camouflage myself intentionally.
Can't now. Your life is on display right now.
No. And that to me was the scariest, was the most difficult. Everything else, I'm like, bring it. I'm like, I'll read, I'll do something, I'll do whatever. I love that. I do it all day, just for fun. But that her direction to jump, I was like, oh dear. Yeah, that was very scary. But that's the thing about Pamela. It's like, whatever that is, I did trust it. I mean, I've told my best friend, I've told my best friend I would trust you with my life. And I would trust her, I trust my best friend with my life too. But you know what I'm saying? Like that is serious to say of someone. So no matter what you are given, I promise, I mean, there's a way and you'll be able to do it. It's not like cruel homework. It's not like giving you something that, to break you or something, it's for your highest and best and can be done. And she really inspires such inspiration from within and such trust with her.
Thank you. Let's take another question. She wants to know, do we believe that anyone could have the capacity to channel? And I do, because I see it. And I feel like even the concept of channeling after realization for me completely changed. I have to use the word channel because that's how I started. That's what you know me as. And do I talk to these beings? Absolutely. But after realization, I could not and do not and never will see them as separate from me ever again. But I understand that when I'm observing people that don't even know they're channeling, because channeling is so heavily misperceived and misunderstood, especially in New Age communities. Channeling you're only deemed to channel. I've noticed if you're trancing, if you're closing your eyes and rocking back and forth and speaking in a weird accent. And please, no offense to anyone who does those beautiful things. I do it sometimes as well. I have been known to take upon particularly the accent of Dolores Cannon if I'm in trance. I think some of you have seen that. It was really hilarious. The most recent time I was on with Candace, and we were someone was asking a question about astrology, and she said, "Stop looking up at the moon." And her voice came out. It was hilarious.
You really do it with Leonardo da Vinci too.
Yeah, my accent became Italian. And so there's nothing wrong with that. If that's happened, that means you feel so much in your oneness with that being that it can happen even much more easily because you don't see distinction. But it also can perpetuate a common misconception in spiritual communities that channeling is when you close your eyes and rock back and forth and speak in funny accents and do weird things. So therefore, channeling is deemed as weird. And Susan and I both grew up in a religious background where if we did those things, we'd have an exorcist coming over to the house right away. Straight up. Yep. Just telling it straight. So we were taught to not really do those kind of things. Now, luckily, I had the type of parents who they knew that I did those kind of things. And starting around age 5, they were like, she's weird. We don't even understand it. So we're going to start praying more, but we're not going to squash it either. You know, my parents were religious, but they were also like, wow, the things she's saying are true. So luckily I didn't have as hard as a background as you did. And we kind of had to go through that and undo that background so that you could kind of deprogram these mind fears that come in with channeling. And I noticed, such a big display of people who are sitting before me and they are clear channels and they're terrified of it because they've been taught to be terrified of it. So this is just something I want to say. Yes, everyone has the capacity to channel. Re-identify with what your definition of channeling actually is. Look deeper at that. You know, what do you think about that? Do you think everyone has the capacity?
How can they not?
Right?
Impossible not to.
Mm-hmm.
I just love what you said because it is such a loose thing. It's without effort. And I'll switch between different fractals of my oversoul, and I can tell because of, you know, the intonation and the phrasing and the energy of it. But it is that fluid. It's just, you know, to think of it as a sectioned off act that is doable by a select few. To me, it really is just opening to more of what's true, what's real. And it is so fluid and so easy. And it is hard. I will say in the beginning, when I became aware of this, and I had many moments of doubting where I thought, well, is this imagination and the answer is it's always imagination and really, I think, but where I would doubt. And I did really appreciate bringing you things to say, this is what I experienced. And it really does a lot when you're first starting out and you're not totally sure. It really means something to be able to have a teacher and bring them, your experience and have them agree and journey more into it with you. But the channeling thing is portrayed as such a slim thing and so distinct from just sitting and breathing or watching TV. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, to me, channeling now is anytime, doing anything, no matter what, if it's noisy, if it's not noisy. It's like, it is just such a fluid, easy thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm so happy you said that.
And it can be as easy as breathing.
Yeah.
Someone was asking me that they were feeling they don't have any clairvoyant gifts. Can they join the mentorship program? And what I have to say to you is most people join without having awareness of gifts. But gifts are not always clairvoyance and clairaudience. Those are, from some of my spirit masters and living masters call those siddhis. If you want to research that, that's spelled SIDDHIS. So what that means is kind of gifts that are beyond what you think are ordinary. What I'm trying to get you into in my program is to accept the ordinary first. And the ordinary is breath and tuning down the ego mind and kind of understanding that you are not body and connecting to who you are, and just breathing and allowing the breath to shut the mind down a little bit so that you can realize who you are. And then cities become as natural as breathing. So I don't avoid cities, like most people in, some Eastern yogis avoid them altogether and they have every right to, in a sense, because it's so distracting if you're taught to focus on clairvoyance and clairaudience as, the little gift that you get, the rainbow, the gold at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. What I'd like to focus on is not seeing rainbows or gold, but knowing, breathing, feeling, and then seeing and hearing. My goodness, they come when they're meant to come. And then cities become as natural as walking and breathing and being, no doing. So yes, you can join, but not strictly always with the goals of clairvoyance. That may not be your city. Your unique gift could come through as something very different than that may or may not be that. And my job as a teacher is to find out what that is eventually and to let it arise when it arises. And in the meantime, focus on breath and clarity of mind, purpose, mission, and then alignments and gifts. They come somewhere along the way in these programs. And most of the time they pop wide open and become very apparent within like 1 to 3 sessions. It's amazing how quickly that seems to happen for most of you. And it surprises you that it's happening. But what's comforting for some people to know is that gifts are natural and that it's okay to not be clairvoyant and clairaudient, or that if you are, perhaps you only see things in a cognizant way in the mind, and perhaps you only get a knowingness, a download. And there's truly, I should correct my words, there is no only to that. Knowingness is vital. It is the foundation of spiritual abilities,
I noticed that too, where because I am someone who for decades has been feverishly Googling all my clairvoyant activities. I got to tell you, I mean, for decades, I would do that, But the funny thing is, when I finally got your help with developing, as you say, from the bottom up, when I finally allowed my emotions in, again, that was huge for me. And when Pamela and I worked in the way we did, it's like the meaning or all of that, it just like so much of this just kind of flows out naturally. Where you might be parsing apart something now because you're interested, but like to me, I really feel like Pamela does, where if you develop in this way, like, from like your purposes and out, from your greatest, deepest passions and out, it's like, it's kind of amazing how elegantly everything else just braids in. And it's much less effort than I thought it would be, than trying to examine something in isolation or get a specific answer on a specific thing. It's like when you assist us in growing the way we do, from the bottom up and out, if you will, so much everything just smooths out and answers itself kind of in a way. And that's the beauty of it, with you teaching us how to become that aware kind of a being. We don't need to, like, I've paid thousands of dollars in the past to get like a reading or help, but nothing ever helped me as much as you teaching me that I am already this way, like that re-remembrance. It's been more empowering than any individual reading.
Christina has a question to you. She said her channeling is becoming more clear, but she finds that when she starts hearing or feeling or seeing and activating the gifts in that way, her ego will then realize what's happening, and then the gifts stop. They just stop coming in. She wonders what your suggestions would be in that experience. And have you had that experience?
I have. When I do the live channeling in my Facebook group, when new things, and I know my guides like get a kick out of this, when new things happen to me, like for example, being live on camera, I ended up channeling a collective for the first time. So that's an example of a first time where I was like, woof, you know, I'm like, what the heck? But I've gotten used to it by practicing. So I just say what's going on. All right, guys, this is happening. And I think because it's I practice so often, it's like I do think it's like I was able to just, you know, I go with it and I just speak out what's happening, what I see, what I hear. But the more you do it, the more you do it, the more you'll be aware of your comfort with it.
Mhm.
And another trick I do, especially when I'm anxious, which has been lately, I will do my meditation in the stone cold dark, kind of like kind of like I guess the theory behind like a deprivation tank. Like I'm like that really helps me just sink so much faster. It makes just my innards feel so much more simple and manageable. So that might be something you want to experiment with. But again, like I really think like nothing beats just practicing it, just doing it every day.
You can start over if you notice that your gifts are stopping. And the more practice, the better. This is a spiritual practice, not a spiritual perfection. And with that being in mind, every practice is perfect. You're always perfect anyway, because you are learning and creating. And what are we going to do? Step in and say, you know what? The way that God is expressing through me right now is imperfect. Stop it. Um, we don't. We just observe it. So what you're doing there, Christina, when your ego's getting in the way and kind of observing what you're hearing and feeling and seeing in the senses during your channeling, and then everything stops. Ego is trained to step in like a camera and take a picture. And then sometimes sort of similar to taking a picture of a small child, they're fine until they see the camera flashing. And then all of a sudden they act differently. So an ego is a lens, and it stops things much in the way that your brain operates in the same way. In vision, it's also a lens. So your retina is like a big lens, and what you think will literally create how your ego chooses to see something. And your ego is learning to stop. If you're in the midst of these breath practices and going towards realization, your brain literally stops working. The camera in your eyes kind of stop working in that same way. The cones and rods in your eyes are shifting. Your DNA is shifting. There's a lot going on scientifically at the cellular level of your essence. You're clearing accumulated karmic memory. You're doing so many things. So sometimes the ego can't continue. You can't develop gifts in that way. Sometimes it just has to stop, and your higher self will reassess, and then it'll come back. So stop, breathe, listen. You know, kind of like stop, drop, and roll. My technique in this is stop. It's okay that it stopped. Breathe, do the one technique. That's breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, and at the very bottom of your breath, very, very bottom. Don't breathe shallowly here. This is a long, slow Kundalini breath. Breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, and then say one. Just say the word one at the end of that. Do that a few times, and then try to reconnect. Reconnect is no try. Sometimes it'll just naturally happen. Then you can reconnect and get back into your channeling zone, and you will notice that the cones and rods in your eyes will readjust again. But if the ego observes in a way that's maybe shaming, judging, guilting, any negative frequencies come in from ego, you're trying to readjust the cones and rods in your eyes to see only love, and to see only oneness, and to see only God in all beings with whom you interact, until you can't distinguish a difference. Therefore, when you're working with these cities, we want to keep that in mind, so that we're getting to the baseline structure, the foundation of why these cities are here and apparent. Otherwise, everything just shuts down. So just breathe, stop, breathe, and then listen. Follow that technique every single time, and you'll get back on track.
I love that. I also, when anything happens like that feels like a little bump like that, just naturally, but now I do it intentionally. I'll put one hand on my heart, like skin to skin if possible.
Listen. That's the listening part.
Is that what it is? Because it feels
Mhm.
much more than just putting your hand on your heart. It feels like it makes your whole system one giant God radar. It's like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my favorite thing. One of my favorite things to do and to feel. The next question they have for you, Susan, is how do they know when they're channeling or not? She said sometimes she feels she's, quote, imagining things and not sure if it's true channeled information. I knew this question would trigger you.
I love this question so much. I don't know if this is real or not, but when Joan of Arc was being, asked questions about, you know, basically she was asked, well, how, like, who are you to be speaking with God? Like, and how do you do that? She
Yes.
said, my imagination, of course. How else would I do? I'm sure she didn't say exactly that, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, imagination is our greatest kind of medium for all of this. It is a natural part of all of this. And I don't know how to explain it better. Maybe Pamela can, but to me, it's like imagination is like the energy that like flexes the muscle and opens the blossom. And it's kind of what somebody just asked. It's like doubting your imagination as it sparks to life when you're receiving something. That to me kind of like crunches it. But to just make a commitment to trusting your imagination, knowing that your imagination is never just imagination, it's infused with, godness, and it's braided through in all of this. Your imagination is so vital.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it better, Pamela. Can you help me?
Oh, you're doing quite well. It's infused with creative intelligence.
Okay.
And this is the part of our creativity that's so beautiful. Form is so beautiful. Creativity is vital for the use of channeling if you're going to be a channel. So I'm just going to go back to what she said. Well, what you said, Mia, about imagining things. Imagination is like the car that you're driving. If you want to get anywhere in channeling, you need it.
Yes.
So the driver is God. Okay, that's spirit. And gas is breath. So this is how I can this is how I can speak in an articulate manner. And people ask me often as a channel, do I have confidence? Confidence is unnecessary. Confidence is an action-based egoic word. Nothing wrong with ego. However, ego observes what God is doing, but ego is not that. Ego is observing what God is doing in the spirit, and then using the ego and the body as a tool to channel such divine codes and messages and awareness. So if you feel that you're imagining things, allow yourself to imagine. That is your car. It is your creative intelligence really wanting to come through. So another thing you said, you're not sure if it's true channeled information. This is that word, that phrase, true channeled information, is a common misperception, particularly in New Age spiritual communities, that something isn't true if, and something isn't true unless, add whatever you're going to add. Let me just crack that wide open. Nothing is true on this earth if it is in form. Ideas aren't true, concepts aren't true, your body isn't true, your mind isn't true, and anything that you're perceiving likely isn't true. Why? Because you are asleep and you are in a dream. Course in Miracles followers, you know what I'm about to say. This is a creative dream that you are experiencing. So let's crack that wide open. Nothing's true anyway. Everything is simply subjective, not objective. The only thing that's objective and that is divinely true is love. And it's the grace that you give yourself, that pure innocence and trust and vulnerability that will allow your imagination to bring you deeper into truth, where you're using your mind, you're using your imagination and the body as a vehicle through which God is traveling. Okay? And then eventually in realization, you start to see that you aren't really channeling. There's no difference between you and any other being. You just realize that you are them. Okay. So can you call yourself a channel anymore for purposes of distinctive value in beginning communities? Yes, you can. I still do, so that you understand what I'm talking about, because there's no way to talk about realization. There really isn't. You're always talking in circles around it, but you can't unless you experience. And even that, it's not an experience. It's something that you already are. So I can go on and on about what is true channeled information and what isn't. But when we start to make distinguishments in that way and discernments in that way, it's just like separating God. Let's see. How are you doing, Susan? Do you have time for more questions?
Yeah, I'm good as long as you are.
Okay, feeling good. We have about 25 more minutes before we need to wrap up, if that's okay with Susan.
Sure.
Empathic channel. They want to know what we mean when we say that. What does it mean, and how to tell? She wants to know how to tell apart her feelings, like her unique feelings as a channel, from the feelings of another being that she's channeling.
I try not to parse anything out or draw any distinction to what's everything that's going on during those times, if that makes sense. I especially try not to do that. Because it's kind of like I want the full on flow of it raw and au natural. So I really, and I think this has come with practice, but when it starts, for example, or like when I'm like, I have practice, and in every way that you can, I'm just like, let's go, like taken, I think probably just practice, but that's kind of my thing. If it's like a roaring river, then like I get my like a little inflatable donut and like hop in and roll out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, Pamela, like I'm not, to answer the question fully, like I'm not someone who really like is always necessarily feeling a mirror image of somebody's hurt or pain or something. When I do, but I try to think of it more as just like, I want my net to be like universes wide and just get what comes, I don't know. I do know one small technique, which I have tried sometimes, like, because both my neighbors are not in greatest of health. And I will notice sometimes I'll say, wait a second, I'm feeling something kind of heavy and it's been creeping. And there will be a time sometimes where I'll say, body, is this mine? I'll ask my body. And you kind of will ascertain like what your body will do if it is or it isn't. Everyone's different. But that's a practical way I could answer that question. That has served me really well. When I suspect that, like, I don't know, but something like that, asking like and relying on the innate wisdom of your body is useful for so many things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very somatic. The body will tell you. And that leads up to another question that we have from another channel that we all know and love, Alana. She wants to know what are our daily practices as a channel. And I'll start with that. Especially as a channel after realization, I want to discuss the body itself and the practices to keep you in it. So breath daily, sort of like I do anywhere from 30 seconds to 20 minutes worth of sadhana in the morning normally. And if I can't, I do it sometime throughout the day. And it's sort of like a reset, if you will. And it's really, really important. It's more important than anything. Your sadhana is, and your connection to breath in that practice, whether it be from awareness or devotion, whatever it is, you need a consistent practice as a channel to keep you really grounded in form. I love kriyas, particularly some of the teachings of Yogananda. I love Kundalini kriyas, and I've created a vast array of kriyas, some of which are through my own cognition and are combinations of other types of kriyas that are a little bit lesser known and more ancient from some of my masters in spirit. So I do a lot of those kriyas that I teach my students as well. So normally each student will get at least one kriya that's very specific to them, to 1 to 5 kriyas that I give to them to keep them in body when they're going through. Because what I'm realizing and observing on my path this time is that many people are coming to me when they're looking to find their own awareness, to reconnect with breath, to go deeper towards realization. I attract a lot of yogis and shamans and deeply practiced people, but I also attract people who are just curious about this and just wanting to step into their wholeness physically and emotionally. And we start there, and then before they know it, they're suddenly ready for deeper practices within themselves. So kriyas, I find, are incredibly vital for channels, no matter where you're going to get it from. If you're a Kundalini yogi, if you work with some of the Yogananda practices, ancient kriyas, Isha Yoga is absolutely amazing. I love Isha Yoga as well through Sadhguru. There are many practices that I can recommend other than my own, or you can take mine. But practices as a channel, your sadhana is so important, just your consistent commitment to that, however it comes to you. And I also find that pratyahara, that branch of yoga in my practice, and I recommend for any aspiring channel or advanced channel, pratyahara is vital. I don't have as many issues with it after realization. I mean, I walked through a casino the other day. My partner at that time, she was like, "Oh my gosh, how are you doing this?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What are you talking about?" I didn't even, I just walked on through. Don't worry, I don't gamble. I heard somebody say, "Oh, you gamble." I'm like, "No, I was there for a specific reason." And that's it, in and out. But yeah, I can walk in big cities and deal with lights and sounds and things that most people just channels start out with me and they're like, oh. So pratyahara, I love qigong techniques with pratyahara. I have a lot of them in my practice as well with Kripa Yoga. I just love pratyahara as a foundational branch of yoga for any channel. That's vital in your practice, And food is part of pratyahara. You can't be a channel of Christ conscious being on one hand, you have God, and then the next hand you have a Diet Coke. Cut it out.
That's been really difficult. Like with that's been a huge stripping away process that I actually brought the intention of bringing joy and ease to that process when I first started my first source tone, and it helped tremendously. Aligning that intention with that first source tone, because I haven't drank forever, but the process of letting go of caffeine and of coffee and of meat and of, I know I'm going to sound like a second grader, but of drinking water. I used to hate water. That's what I would say. I hate water. It's boring. It's like drinking a puddle.
I did that too for a while in my life. Yeah.
I mean, all of that. That has been a very major adjustment, but it is one that I often kind of rebring that intention to keep being like joyful and easy. That's like a definite intention of mine that I continually follow up on.
Yeah, absolutely. Pratyahara is a big practice because ahara is literally translated, that Sanskrit word is translated to food. And they don't just mean energy, they mean energy in everything. Food is energy. So how do you feed yourself? I find that if you're eating death, if you're eating dead things, and you want to live, it's not practical in the life of a pure channel. It's not practical. So if you want anything from the basics of a pure complexion. A lot of people ask me about my skin and why it's always glowing, why I don't have issues with my skin. How can I get away with not wearing makeup, et cetera, those vain things, down to if you want a clear mind and you want clear emotions and not to be depressed or anxious. Food can be medicine or death. So you have to make a clear choice of which you're going to choose. And my advice to you is definitely everything that Susan just said. Cut the meat, cut the drinking. You have to be pretty advanced in your pratyahara to be able to drink and clear it right away. Some people can do it, some people can. So why risk it? If you are unsure, or if you know that you can't, then stop drinking. Smoking, absolute death. It's just a bad idea. There's so many things, so many ways that we can go into it, but I do tend to follow a pranic lifestyle. And what that means is I observe positive prana, neutral prana, and negative prana. And everyone's pranic inclinations are slightly different because we are not jars that someone can stamp a label on. So for me, negative prana is onions and green chilies. However, garlic to me is medicine, and I use it accordingly. And if I were to get a cold and if I were to eat onions, I'm not even sure I could tolerate it, but I can tolerate garlic. Mushrooms, pure negative prana for me, neutral prana for other people. And in most cultures, when following the pranic lifestyle and Ayurveda, they would put that in the neutral category. But neutral should be only once a day, if not less, because neutral pranic foods make you lazy. They make you energetically tired. So tomatoes, potatoes, cheese and dairy, things like that, those are all neutral for most people. And some, for me, cheese is neutral as well. It's not actually negative, but for some yogis, they cannot have cheese and they cannot have milk products. That's negative. Meats and alcohol and caffeine are considered negative prana, but for me, caffeine is neutral prana in moderation. Do you see? You have to know the body. I still drink caffeine like every day, not a ton, just a little bit, but every day. And I realize that there are some days when it's like, okay, today you don't need any, or today you need a lot less, so that's the way that it is. And then positive prana is, all the raw fruits and vegetables are primarily what prana is from the positive frequency management Ayurvedic lifestyle. So yeah, it's, if you want to live, eat living foods. And what I mean by that is raw fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds.
I also, over the course of anyway, I would also recommend if anyone's interested to get muscle tested for foods. I mean, I found out some of this about myself through that. That kind of can also help to confirm your intuition. If your body doesn't like something, you can get, I forget the actual word for it, but some naturopaths or some, even chiropractors, like they do like, food sensitivity testing with muscle testing. And that's been super helpful for me because I've always had digestion issues and I take a lot of antibiotics. So that's a practical thing you could try out too.
Yeah, that's true. Spirit was reminding us that garlic is also considered neutral prana because it's a nervous stimulant. And it does. That's one of the reasons why. But for some people who have a more sluggish nervous system, like me, I have a pretty sluggish nervous system. So garlic can be a stimulant that's necessary. So for me, garlic is medicine. It's not neutral prana. I can have it as much as I want, but I do still choose it to be something that's used as medicine in moderation when needed. Because channeling does interesting things to the brain. Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Oh, gene codes. They're asking, do we know about gene codes to learn purpose? I really find that gene codes are nothing that we can't learn from the Vedas. Just so you know, gene codes are nothing new. Someone came out with a book about gene codes, and it's an amazing book, and I love it and support it. Absolutely. Everyone should read it. And it's all right there in the Vedas as well, in ancient literature. So they connect you to the transcendental realms. It's amazing. And yeah, you can learn purpose that way. But I will give you a quote about purpose from Yeshua. He said, we're here to love and to be helpful. Everything else is contracts within the dream that we are creatively playing with divine intelligence.
I love
that. Oh yeah, Spirit also said the only dairy that the yogic diet allows is raw milk and ghee. Yeah.
I'm still getting there. Oh, good Lord. I have not dropped the dairy yet.
I can't have raw milk or ghee, by the way, and I'm a yogi. And I can't. So again, this is just like for me, milk, cheese is neutral, but milk and ghee and butter are absolutely off limits. Like, and cheese is like getting to a point where I might take it out as well. Right now it's considered neutral product for me.
So would you say the bulk of your protein comes from nuts and seeds?
Mm-hmm. I say that Americans are worried too much about protein. It comes from raw foods, nuts and seeds and vegetables. And it comes plant protein, unless you have PKU, which is very rare, a genetic disorder that involves not being able to get your proteins from plants, which is, like I said, rare. Then you should be able to get all the proteins you need from this. So
I actually digest meat so poorly that for the first time in 5 years, my protein is now in range. And that is only because I dropped meat. Like my body can absorb these other proteins much better. And as it turns out, it was straight up like not absorbing the meat at all. So it's really interesting.
someone said, we need to copyright the Vedas.
Make them into like 100,000 bumper stickers.
Modalities out of like common information in the Vedas. But I find that it's beautiful though, that that's happening, because let me give you a different perspective on that. This information, some people don't have the capacity because they don't believe that they do, and their belief is limiting. They cut themselves off from the access to sacred text. So with that being stated, when someone comes along and takes all that knowledge and makes a process out of it and makes it palpable and simple without all of the languaging that many people can't process. Many people don't understand the language of A Course in Miracles, the Vedas. Way of Mastery is a little more simple. I'm just listing some of the texts that I have really enjoyed as sacred text. And when someone creates a process out of that and makes it simple and palpable to the majority of beginning awakening beings, I think that's so beautiful. I love this, that's happening in our country. So go for it. Do you think that Krishna's going to come down and be like, do not take this from this Veda? Krishna is a very compassionate, giving, connecting being. It's okay, guys. Yeah, proteins from lentils. Someone asked about proteins from lentils. I find that that's powerful, but again, it should not be the majority of your diet. Your 40 to 50% of your diet should be raw. So maybe lentils to slow down the system at night, have some cooked lentils and cooked vegetables. That's the time to make yourself some dal, I love curry. I could eat it every day.
Too.
Yeah, love it. We have just a few more minutes. And for those of you who are wondering where to find Susan, if you want to work with her directly for her own mentorship programs and as a channel, she is fabulous. She's an amazing alchemist. She teaches a lot from the foundation of alchemy. She knows a lot about goddess energy as well. And she's a lot like, you remind me a lot of Marion Hasna, if you remember my interview with her. Or her interview with me rather, and her mystery school. We have a lot of like mystery school information coming through. So if you want to find her, you can find her at susandyer.com. Where can they find you on YouTube?
My YouTube handle is Susan Dyer 1111. And on Facebook, you can find me. I have a women's group called Divining Women.
Yeah, let's see, Facebook. Divining Women. Okay, and then susandyer.com, just so that we can spell. It's Dyer.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how you can find her. Let's take a few more questions before we close out. Someone said he finds when he eats raw, we're talking about frequency management and pranic lifestyle for a channel. He said that when he eats raw, he doesn't feel full. And I kind of wanted to get your take on that as well, because what I noticed is that that's people's stomachs are so stretched from continual eating of cooked foods that we don't need, and the American portion sizes are incredible, that what happens is it takes some time for your stomach to shrink. Like that can be years worth of work, to where you're going to feel full off of vegetables and fruits. That's going to take a little bit of time. So give yourself some patience. What's your experience with eating raw, Susan?
Well, I've had that's been tricky for me. Because my GI tract is, I've taken antibiotics for like either every day or every other day for several years now.
It's rough.
So it's hard for me, and lightly steaming seems to be a little bit easier. But the other thing I'll say is, you are eating raw, to get really, really pure, unprocessed olive oil.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to heat olive oil up. Something about it breaks down, and it's just not as good for you. But, for me, I'm like, sign me up for like a pound of garlic and olive oil and some salt, and like, oh my gosh. But like, even if you're eating raw, to toss that in really high quality, uncooked olive oil.
Wow.
That will allow for a little bit more fat, which might help a little bit with satiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and adding avocados, those are some pretty simple suggestions. Adding, some almond butter and things of that nature, if it's vegan, is incredibly helpful. And, as Roger just mentioned, he said he saw a study that food increases his energy by 15% if blessed. And I completely agree with that. Blessing your water.
Yeah.
It's Jordan in particular loves to sing to her water and tone into her water. And when I drink water, I just kind of go, oh, that feels really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's doing those things for yourself. It's also a practice of self-love that can be amazing. So we're going to close out, guys. This has been an incredible interview, and I feel so blessed to bring Susan Dyer to you. She's an incredible channel, incredible alchemist, incredible healer, but the way that she heals is a little different. She's not going to call herself a healer. I heard herself just flinch when I said the word, because what she does is she connects you to you, and then you do that healing.
That's funny. Thank you so much, Pamela. I love you so much. You know that.
I love you too.
Anyone is curious about Pamela and her processes or anything, message me anytime. I will always just toot the horn of Pamela. Anytime. Ask me. Is that Jordan?
Yeah.
I think I just heard a little Jordan back there.
She just walked in. Yeah. Oh, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Again, you can find her, Susan Dyer, channel and alchemist and teacher, at susandyer.com. That's DYER. And is it Susan Dyer 111? Is that your YouTube handle? Okay. You can find her there, and subscribe there. You can find me for my mentorship programs at PamelaAaralyn.com. If you have any questions about it, you can email us, and myself or one of my team members will get back to you. Someone asked me this question this morning in session. She's like, how do you choose your students? I'm like, yeah, I actually choose my students to make sure that we are aligned, etherically speaking. Before working together, I have people, if I don't know them and if I don't have a feeling about them, I ask that they send me their intentions, goals, and a picture. So if you're curious about if we would be a good match, not if you would be good for me, but also if I would be good with you, if we really merge well and mesh well energetically in the way that we would work together, I urge you to do that, and I'll take a look and let you know. If you have questions about how I work, you can look at those mentorship programs at PamelaAaralyn.com. So I will
I would highly recommend it if you're wondering. Oh my gosh. Really. She'll find the exact thing, that kind of sets you loose upon yourself,
Sets you loose. That's one way to say it. Yeah, it can be a catalyzing experience, that's for sure. And it can also be a gentle activating experience, and it can be everything in between. Both. Yeah, it was both for Susan. I'm sure there are times when she wanted to reach to the screen and strangle me, and then other times no.
No,
Other
no.
times where, you know, it was just a really gentle, loving time as well.
Yeah.
But what I love about working with people, just to wrap this up, is that there isn't a single one of you that sits before me that I don't see myself in.
Mm.
Not a single one of you. So if you're sitting before me and you've been the most difficult client I've ever had and difficult student I've ever had, I've got to look at myself. Oh, look, there's 20-year-old me. Oh, look, there's 30-year-old me. And those reflections don't mean that you're doing something wrong. They don't mean that you're doing something right. It means that you're able to see you in a being and no longer perceive separation. So when you can do that and you can look upon peace with every brother and sister upon this earth, this is a Yeshua quote, and you can look upon every brother and sister upon this earth with peace, then you have arrived.
That's beautiful.
All right, we're going to close now. I'll see you
Thank
soon.
you, guys.
See you very soon, Susan.
Okay.
Thank you.